The Caligula effect overdose was a therapeutic experience that I was not expecting that I would have, but honestly, it's exactly what I needed at this point in my life. So, I received something in the mail a couple days ago. Inside this package is, my bachelor's degree in communication studies from university. I just got it a couple days ago. And, you guys have no idea how happy it makes me to finally graduate and finish school. And, the time has come. Your boy is growing up, and I'm being thrust into the life of full-fledged adulthood. Now, I don't really think that it's uncommon to feel a little nervous and intimidated about this next step in my life. It's pretty important for anybody. But I'm not gonna lie when I say that there were many times where it got difficult, it got hard, but both in the past and in the present. Now, talking to you guys now, I still, I have a lot of self-doubt, I still have a massive lack of confidence, and there are many times where I do consider just giving up, wondering if all of this is actually worth doing. It's that scary feeling of just moving on to something different from what you've been accustomed to your whole life. Just go to school, do well, come home and do whatever you want, right? But now things won't be like that anymore. And that's scary. However, after playing the Caligula effect overdose, I can very definitively say that my resolve has been restored, and it has never been stronger than how it is now. Because the Caligula effect is essentially a story about growing up, whether you wanted to or not. I think this game has a very powerful, very meaningful message to express. I think this is one of the very few games that I would actually call a mature title. And I don't mean that in the sex and violence kind of way. Like, actually mature, like taking on very difficult topics to talk about and just confronting them in the same way that the many characters in the story have to confront with the fact that life's hard and things are not going to work out, but you just can't run away from your problems. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go ahead and remind you guys how I tend to do these reviews. I usually have two different versions of the review. I have a short version and a long version. The short version is a TLDR, I don't have any time, just tell me if the game is good or not kind of version, which we'll get to in a bit. And then we have the long version, which is just the regular review where I expand on all of those points in greater detail. So let's begin with the short version. TLDR, I ain't got no time. Please just tell me if it's good or not. So, lightning round. What is this game? This game is a Japanese RPG with dungeon crawling and social elements. Also, it is a complete revamp. Might as well call it a remake, because this is what it is a remake. So many things that got changed to the point where I can very comfortably say that it's a remake from the original PlayStation Vita version of Caligula. Oh, it's a revamp, so what's new in it? It has a higher resolution, better frame rate. You can actually play as a girl, a female protagonist now. There are a bunch of brand new characters that did not exist in the Vita version, and there are many visual changes that make the game look absolutely beautiful. I went back to watch some footage of the original Caligula and PS Vita, and honestly, it does not compare in the slightest to this newer version. I can tell you with no hesitation that Caligula Overdose is the definitive version of Caligula that you should play. Now, speaking of which, let's just get this question out of the way. Is the game good? Yes, very good. What can I compare this game to? If you like the Persona games, it is very likely that you'll enjoy this too. Hell, even the art style looks kind of similar to those early Shin Megami Tensei games. And speaking of early, one of the main writers for Persona 1 and 2 was also involved in writing this game, so you know that you're gonna get into some good stuff here. What's the best thing about it? The combat, the story, and the very clever way that the music is implemented throughout the whole game. What's the worst thing about it? The game is a bit of a slow and kind of a boring start, admittedly. The cutscenes specifically are not very polished. There's some blemishes here and there. And also there's something about the NPC interaction that is very ambitious and cool, but the more you play around with it, it starts to become significantly less cool. Where can I play it? PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC. And of course, if you want to play the original, that's of course available on PlayStation Vita. Game of the Year contender? Yes, absolutely. At least for me. Alright, so those are all the main points of the game out of the way. Is it a good game? Yes. Should you get it? Absolutely. If you like Persona, if you like RPGs, if you like awesome combat systems and strategy in your fights, absolutely go get it. That's all you need to know, then go ahead and be on your way. Now, for everybody else that wants to stay and hear me elaborate a little bit more, then stick around for the long version of the review coming up right now. So the story takes place in a virtual fake city called Mobius. It is important that I establish that it is a fake city because that's essentially how the game opens up. Usually, when it comes to comics, movies, anime, and a whole bunch of other stuff, that tends to be the plot twist at the end, right? It's like, oh, it turns out everything was fake. No, this is just the setup for the rest of the game. This is a fake world created by a virtual being called Mew. Very similar to Hatsune Miku and Vocaloids and stuff like that. They really do make that parallel because Mew does sing and she uses her music to brainwash people into thinking that, you know, this is her life even though the whole thing is fake. Basically the goal of this girl, Mew, is to make everybody happy. She sees that the world is an awful, bad place to be in. People can't fulfill their dreams over there. And so she says, you know what? I'm gonna create this brand new world where everything is great and everything is happy and everybody gets their wishes granted in this place called Mobius. Everybody is young and beautiful and amazing. And of course, with her music kind of hypnotizing everybody into thinking that they're living in paradise, that's kind of how the game starts up. You're brainwashed, you're not really aware that you're living in a fake world until your protagonist character, he or she, this time around, you can actually play as a girl or a guy in whatever way you wish. There really aren't any big differences, so be sure to choose whoever you want. But your male or female protagonist realizes, like, wake ups, they get woke, and they realize, oh my god, this is a fake place, this is not the real world, I gotta get out of here. And so you and a very select few amounts of people are also woke. They're also very aware that this is not the real world and they gotta go back home. But unfortunately, they're not allowed to leave. And so what they gotta do is that they gotta find the creator of the world, Mew. They gotta find her and they basically gotta convince her to let them out. But of course, it's not that easy. There's a bunch of musicians that write the songs for Mew. And these are essentially the bosses. These are all of the bad guys that are gonna get in your way, that they wanna conserve this world. And so they go against you, you fight them, you take them down, and that's, you know, those are the steps that you take in order to be able to find more ways or find some sort of solution for you to get out of this fake world. And that's basically the setup of the whole story. I'm not really gonna go beyond that point because that would be spoilers. And on top of that, this is a little bit of a criticism, but nothing really happens until beyond the halfway point. A lot of it is just looking for Mew, and it's almost like a Super Mario Brothers, sorry your princess is in another castle kind of thing, because the vast majority of the dungeons is like, is Mew here? No? Okay, let's look somewhere else. Is Mew here? Go through the whole dungeon, fight a boss, story, oh, she's not here, and just keep going like that. You're taking out every single boss individually, and it's like, oh, Mew's not here, go somewhere else. If she's not here, go somewhere else. Your princess is in another castle, for a while, until there is a certain point where things do start to change a little bit, and that's where the story gets more interesting. But I can assure you that the story is definitely worth following. Because when you're not chasing that main storyline, you do spend a lot of your time in between dungeons interacting with all your classmates. Because there are a bunch of people that know that the world is fake, you create a club, basically. A team of people that are dedicated to getting out of that place, and so they all have their different stories. Again, very similar to Persona, they have their little social link where you can meet up with them, give them the correct choice that they want to hear, and they end up liking you more. You find more about their backstory, what their struggles are. And it's very interesting because in Mobius, every single person that exists in that world is because they couldn't handle life. It's just like Mew says, right? The world is an awful place and some people simply can't get through it. So that's why she created this world to make everybody happy. So that people that weren't able to fulfill their dreams to be able to fulfill them here. So that means that every single character in the game has some deep-rooted dark secret within them, you know? Something that they're embarrassed about, something that they're hiding. If you see a character in this game that's like a little too perfect, you know, and if you're wondering, man, why is this guy even here, right? Like, he's super perfect. Okay, well, that should set off some red flags for you, because it's kind of like that movie Surrogates, you know, with who's this guy? Bruce Willis, yeah, Surrogates with Bruce Willis, where everybody was living, you know, fake lives through a surrogate. They were all young and beautiful, but in reality, you know, one of the hot girls was like this, you know, disgusting fat guy. It's kind of like that, you know? There are some characters that, you know, have some really big insecurities about them in reality, which didn't allow them to live their life. You know, they gave up on life. And it's like, no, life is too hard. I don't want to live like this. And so when they are in this fictional world, they can have all of their dreams and all of their wishes be realized, because Mew was like this god figure that's like, oh, you want a lot of money? Here, have it. You want to be hot and sexy? Here, you can have it. You're fat and you want to be fit? Here, you can have it. You know, any wish that they have will be granted. And so whenever you see like a really beautiful person or somebody that's really nice, like you can't trust anybody. It's really interesting, because then when you get really comfortable with a character, you kind of have some trust issues, right? Because it's like, oh wait, you might not actually be who I think you are. And it does happen in various times with many different characters. It's like, oh, you know, you think this guy is this, but he's actually that. Especially when you're in this world where nobody ages, and you have to know what their true age is. And so, yeah, stuff gets really, really crazy when you're in this world where essentially everybody is fake. Even the people that are woke can be really fake in their own way, and they hide stuff of their own. And you'll never know unless you spend time with them, increase their social link, and, you know, they like you, and they start to reveal their secrets. And that's not just for your main party. Please, I hope you're sitting down for this, because this is kind of shocking. There are more than 500 NPCs that you can interact with and be friends with and get rewards based on becoming friends with them. Yes, I am not exaggerating when I'm saying this. There is more than 500 people that you can interact with. And on top of that, not only can you be friends with them and, you know, complete their own little side quest, but you can actually invite them into your party and they can fight along with you when you're going through dungeons. So technically, you could have no party members. You could be completely alone in a dungeon. But if you see students walking around, you can just talk to them and be like, hey, you want to join my party? Sure. And it's not even like a main character in the story, it's just some rando that you find that's like a classmate that's a close friend of yours. You can bring him into your party and you can have like your protagonist and like 3 other dudes that are like faceless, but like, you know, they're a character and they fight and they have their own weapons and you can put equipment on them, which is super interesting. It is a very ambitious idea of having literally everybody have the possibility of being a party member with a story to follow. Now, granted, all of this sounds really cool on the surface until you actually start talking to all of them. 500 sounds really cool until you realize that, oh, a lot of these characters start to repeat themselves. A lot of them do say a lot of the same stuff. Some of the side quests are almost exactly the same as other side quests. Like, there was one guy where he was saying like, oh, you know, I really trust you, so let me tell you this. I've been hearing like voices in my head and it's kind of screwing me up. I wonder if you could help me. And so I thought that was like a very unique quest. I was like, oh wow, you know, if I hadn't bumped into that guy, I probably would have never seen that quest. But sure enough, I bump into another guy and he said almost exactly the same thing. So it's like, it kind of deflates the fun and it kind of defeats the purpose of you wanting to go and talk to everybody, you know, when some of them do overlap and some of them do repeat themselves. It's like, why should I go for all 500? I would have very much preferred it if there was maybe like 50 instead of 500, so like that you can have less people, but all of their stories are a lot more unique. But either way, it's still a nice idea either way, and there are moments where you do get separated from your team and you have no choice but to recruit people that you become friends with. So yeah, it is important that you talk to as many people as possible and solve their issues and get to know them a little better so that can, you know, bring you some benefits along the way. Which does remind me, if there's a few more things that I want to mention in terms of the story, is that there are a lot of very mature themes in this game. And by mature, I don't just mean sex and violence, you know? It's not that shallow, you know? One thing that I do enjoy about having so many people to talk to is that all of the different themes that are tackled are very serious. Like, they get really real. You know, it's stuff about, you know, body shaming, like your self-image. You know, if somebody thinks that he's too fat or too thin. Suicide is a topic. You know, blackmail and threatening. I think there's like one girl that's like addicted to breaking windows and stuff. There are a lot of really screwed up people in here, but you know, they're in this world for a reason, you know? If they were perfect little individuals, they wouldn't need to give up on life and come to this world in the first place. So everybody's got some problems. Everybody has a struggle. And seeing how it's handled and seeing people kind of reflect on it. And even some very relatable stuff, some very topical stuff. Just to give you a sampler, there's one girl that really, really hates men. And so, she's very hypocritical, and she gets owned, and, you know, she has her reasons, and you know, see her backstory for why she hates men so much. There's another girl that wants to be like a live streamer and wants to be like YouTube famous, but, you know, the reason for why she's, obviously in this world is because her dreams were not realized, and she gave up on life, so that should already give you like a pretty good clue as to why she's here, and you know why, oh, I'm a very popular streamer here. So, and that happens a lot, you know, where like these really popular, really amazing people, including the villains, you know, a lot of the villains are like these really awesome musicians, super popular, really handsome looking people, where it's like, yes, I'm a really awesome music producer in this world. So, there are many moments where the characters just call the enemies out. It's like, oh yeah, you know, you want to maintain the world, this fake world as it is now because you're, you know, hot stuff here just because you were a failure over there. And so that triggers people, and, you know, obviously there's more to it than that. There's a lot more specifics that I'm not getting into right here, because I don't really want to spoil stuff, but that alone makes every single character worth talking to, because everybody has a dark side, which I think is really, really awesome to see. It is a very ambitious idea. I love seeing this game in action. Now, with that said, I do need to warn you guys that the start of the game is a very slow burn. It is a little flat, a little boring. The game doesn't really show off its true colors until you're kind of done with the tutorial segment, and as soon as all of the introductions are out of the way, then it starts to get more interesting. But I do admit that at the very beginning, you do kind of need to roll with the punches a little bit before it starts to get really fun. Now, speaking of fun, let's talk about the dungeon crawling. So most of the interactivity that you're going to have with the game is a very basic JRPG dungeon crawling structure. Find a dungeon, get all the way to the end, fight the boss, get story, and rinse and repeat with a whole bunch of different themed dungeons. Obviously, they're all going to have their own little theme and their gimmick that comes along with it. But for the most part, a lot of it is fairly repetitive, just a lot of really big hallways and then bumping into enemies, fighting them, and keep moving. Even the puzzles and stuff really aren't that challenging at all. They feel more like speed bumps rather than actual obstacles or challenges for you to overcome. But in my opinion, that's okay, because they more than make up for it with the amazing combat. This is going to be the place where you're going to find the biggest difference between the Vita game and the PS4 version. In the Vita game, it seemed like everything was happening in real time. You just bump into an enemy and you immediately just start fighting. Here, they really do take you to a separate space. They create like this really awesome force field that creates more color in the environment. It just looks very visually pleasing. And you're in this 3D space. It's technically turn-based, but not really. So you have your 4 team members, and you have them all in this space where you can move them around wherever, and then you can have them attack from different positions, and you can time the different attacks in whatever time you want. You have 3 actions per turn. So you can use one move to just move around from here to there, and then use the other 2 moves to just attack. Or the 3 of them are just for attacking. Or the 3 of them are just for moving, you know? Everything is up to you. The combat is surprisingly very complicated, but in a good way. I don't mean that in like a confusing way. I mean that that there's a lot of systems and tiny little intricacies for you to pay attention to if you really want to get the most out of the combat. Now, my initial playthrough was on the easiest difficulty because I wasn't more interested in the story, personally, and so I wanted to blast through the battles as fast as possible. But now I really regret doing that, because you don't really take full advantage of the combat when you're on easy. Because on easy, you just do your basic attack, you shoot a guy, they're down, they go down super easily, really, really fast, and you just keep moving. And so that ends up feeling kind of boring. You don't really take full advantage of everything that the game has to offer combat-wise. So my personal recommendation is to hike up that difficulty to as high as you feel comfortable. Because I started playing the game on the harder difficulty, and like, I was honestly enjoying myself so much more. It was a lot more challenging. Every battle felt like a boss battle. Because they were difficult in a really good way, because now you really have to think about your placement in the map. It was very strategy heavy, very tactics, very Final Fantasy tactics, where because you can time the attack and when you want it to hit instead of just automatically doing it, you can actually synchronize the different moves with all of your different characters. And they all have different specialties, you know. One is really good for critical hits, one is really good for debuffs, one is a defensive character, one is a technical character. And so you can make all of these combinations and use that to your advantage with all the different enemies. You know, there's one that's melee enemies, so you gotta have a melee counter, and then you send them flying up into the air, and then you can use another dude where you can time the attack so that you can shoot him in the air, and that goes for extra damage. And then when the enemy hits the ground, you can use another character that specializes in hitting enemies when they're down on the ground. So you hit him with that hammer, and that's even more damage. Is this beautiful chain of very calculated actions that can really make it feel like it's this Rube Goldberg machine of awesome RPG anime attacks. It's really beautiful. When you know what you're doing and you have this very tightly planned out strategy, it's awesome. It is beautiful to see it work out in your favor. On top of that, you have something called the stress meter, and so that increases as you go on, which is essentially just limit breaks from Final Fantasy VII. It fills up, and then you get a super special ultimate attack that you can use. So when things get really hard, you can definitely turn the tables with that kind of big attack, and you can factor that into your strategy as well. Now, speaking of Final Fantasy VII, there are some areas in the game that are not 3D rendered, but they're actually 2D rendered. And you're running around, which, like, honestly, that gave me Final Fantasy VII flashbacks right there. A 3D rendered character walking around in a 2D environment, like, wow, I never thought I'd see that in 2019. But, you know, whatever, that's not a good thing nor a bad thing. I mean, it's just a little observation that I made. There's nothing bad about it, I just wanted to say that. But let's see, man, what else? I already talked about the combat. The combat is honestly, like, the best part of the whole game. It's really, really cool. Oh yeah, so as I said, because you can recruit you know, any of the 500 people that exist in this game, you can also create strategies with them, and you can, you know, equip them with upgrades and stuff like that, just like how you would the main characters. Now, of course, you spend the majority of your time with the main cast, and they're the ones that are super leveled up, as opposed to the NPCs that are not as high level, so it is difficult for you to kind of try and recruit people when you already have the main characters that you spend a lot of time with, and they develop and they have skills that you can upgrade and stuff. So I feel like the only reason for why I actually started recruiting people was in those occasions where I got separated from my group and I had no choice but to grab just random people, no matter what the level was, just so that I could have more firepower as opposed to just fighting everybody alone. On top of the awesome fights, the music is actually a very interesting thing in this game. Remember what I said about Mew? Mew is actually using music to essentially hypnotize and brainwash people into being okay with being in this world. And I love how they implement her and all of the bosses to become kind of this omnipresent force in the entire game. The music, the background music, is not non-diegetic. It is a diegetic thing in the world. And by that I mean that is not this thing that happens that the characters don't acknowledge. They acknowledge it all the time. The music that you hear exists within the world of the game. And every single dungeon has a different music track attached to it, which is composed by one of the bosses. And so that song is a song composed for Mew to sing so that she can continue brainwashing people. And of course, because the bosses have their own story and their own struggles and their own, like, deep-seated secrets, the song and the lyrics that are involved are emblematic of the character that wrote them. So I think that's just really, really cool, especially when you're running through the dungeon and in the background you hear the instrumental to the song, but as soon as you get into a battle, you can actually hear the vocals and more instruments. The music becomes better, especially during the boss fights. A lot of the boss fights have like remixes to the songs that you hear in the dungeon, so yeah, I was not expecting such a vibrant soundtrack, but I highly recommend that you guys pay close attention to the music because it legitimately enhances the story a lot more than I was expecting. Music is an incredibly powerful tool when you're making anything, when you're making a movie or a video game, and I feel like people don't really take it into account or put as much love and care into it as games like these, where it fits into the story and it talks volumes about the characters, and the characters actually acknowledge that there is music in the background as opposed to having it just happen separately from the story and then you think about it later. No, this is a thing that is happening in real time with the game. So that's basically the whole game. You keep doing that until you beat all the last bosses, and that's it. You beat the game and the story is over. And that's it, right? Wrong. There's actually more endgame stuff to do. After you beat the game once, you activate a new game plus mode. I think there's a couple of other modes that you unlock as well. There's a brand new dungeon that you can take on. There's a whole bunch of other smaller stuff that you can, do after you beat the game one time. And of course, if you want to be a completionist and you want to make friends and do all of the side quests for all 500 people, then of course, you can obviously go ahead and do that if you want. And another thing that you can do after beating the game one time, this is a little spoiler-ish, but not really. Very early on in the game, there does come a point into the story where you can make a big decision. So there's basically a good guy route and a bad guy route. And so depending on what choice you make, then it kind of locks you into one of the endings. So after beating the game once on one of those routes, I think it might be good for you to play through the game again with New Game Plus, carry some stuff over, and then do the opposite decision to that. And now that in this new version you can play as either a boy or a girl, maybe you can switch up the gender just to make it different. There are some pretty good reasons for you to kind of play through this again. And I know that this is an RPG, but it really isn't that long. Especially when you play on easy, obviously you can just blast through a lot of the fights. I ended up beating this game in around 30 hours or so, and that was me really taking my time with it. So if you really do want to rush through it, you might even beat this game in maybe 25 hours. A regular RPG is usually longer than that, so by normal RPG standards, this is a fairly short game. And it can be longer if you wanted to, because again, 500 people that you can talk to. I think I've covered everything. There is one last thing that I want to do, which is to point out some criticisms. No game is perfect. There definitely are some parts of this game that kind of fall flat, and I do want to point them out right here. There really aren't all that many, so, kind of a backhanded compliment. Doesn't have too many screw-ups. So, as I said before, this game is a remake, revamp, reimagining of the original PlayStation Vita game, the Caligula effect. And so that game on Vita had a lot of trouble actually running right. For the most part, it was stable, but when the screen got too crazy, there would be a lot of frame drops, there'd be a lot of slowdown, and the loading times were really long. Here, that doesn't exist. It is very visually pleasing. Obviously, the frame rate is a lot more stable, but there are some parts, usually during the dialogue scenes, where things come off as very clumsy, very awkward, and there is some slowdown in some areas. And on top of that, this game really has a thing for black fade-outs. When you would think that certain scenes would flow a lot more nicely, they really don't. There's a lot of black fade-outs. They take you into places that, really don't require it. Sometimes you're standing there, black fade-out, go back, and you're standing in the same place. Like, nothing really happens. It just kind of loads up more dialogue. Or instead of, cutting away to different camera angles, it instead black fades out in and out of it, which is just really annoying. And also, some of the sound effects in the dialogue scenes are awful, are absolutely terrible. They sound very muffled, very low volume, you can barely hear it most of the time. It's mostly during the opening, the very beginning of the game. That's why I say that it's kind of a slow burn at the beginning. Most of the things that you see in the game is not particularly flattering. The game doesn't really get good until after all the tutorial stuff, which doesn't take long, but still, it might leave a bad impression on all of you guys at the beginning, but stick with it, because it really does get better. But there are many moments where, like, a guy punches someone else and it just sounds terrible. Oh, speaking of the dialogue, if you guys are really big fans of hearing anime women yell a lot, then this is the perfect game for you. The last and final thing that I want to point out as a criticism is about those 500 plus people that you can talk to. So as I said, every single character, the closer you get to them, they have one side quest that you can do for them, and when you complete it, you become close friends. And that's basically you completing their story and you can move on to someone else. But the problem is that with so many people to talk to and to manage, you would think that they would let you do multiple quests all at once, right? No. You can only do one quest per person. And if you want to do another quest, you have to abandon the previous one and, start this new one, which is a massive pain in the ass. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't let you do like 10 at once or just have them saved somewhere and just get to it later. I don't understand why you can only do one at a time and then have to abandon one if you want to do something new. Also, the students are really difficult to track down. I don't know if it's just me being stupid and not knowing how to do this, but if you want to talk to a very specific person, you really can't. There's no way for you to just teleport to where the person is at, you have to go and find them, which, out of 500 people and you don't really know where any of them are, it's just, I don't know. On top of that, it's a pain in the ass having to talk to everybody because they have different rankings, their friendship level basically goes from 1 to 3, and so there really is no reason for you not to talk to them. There's no punishment or no time limit, there's no energy bar where it's like, oh, I talked to you one time, see you tomorrow. No, they just stay standing there. So if you go from 0 to level 1, you can just talk to them again immediately after and just level 1, level 2, talk to them again, level 3, and you're my friend. And then it activates the side quests that you can do for them. And so this happens with literally everybody. I think in the PlayStation Vita version, there was a limit, and it was a lot more arduous and a lot more time-consuming to be friends with somebody. Here in this new Overdose edition, it is way easier. Just talk to somebody once, and you already leveled them up. Although that really makes me wonder, if it's really so easy to level them up and activate a side quest, I really wish that they would just cut the middleman off and just give me the side quest. And then be like, oh, thank you for doing this for me. Thank you for doing this favor for me. I'm now your friend. Done. Instead of having to go through this busy work of having to talk to them and have these recycled lines be repeated over and over and over and over again, it becomes tiresome. There's a fast forward button in the controller for this game. And the vast majority of the time, after I saw the same line for the 20th time, I said just skip, 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 skip. Level 3? Good. Now tell me what your problem is. And yeah, I really don't see the point in having your NPCs level up in friendship when it's so damn easy to do. You can do that in like 5 seconds. You're just fast forwarding through all the dialogue just to get to the side quests, Again, it's like a speed bump that doesn't it doesn't allow you to get to where you want to go fast enough. I'm trying to think of other criticisms about this game outside of just, spoiling the story and what happens in there, but I think that's everything. I am seriously considering doing a spoilers review for this game because a lot of the things that make this game so impactful, thoughtful, and amazing, it's in the story and everybody's struggles and all of the stuff that happens later on that I don't want to reveal now. Please take my word for it when I say that the Caligula effect Overdose on PS4, Switch, and PC is a completely different ball game from the original PlayStation Vita version. If you played the Vita version and you got turned off by it and you really weren't into it, forget about it. Forget about that version. This newer version is the definitive version of the game that was meant to be played from the very beginning. This is what Caligula should have been from the very beginning. The differences between the Vita version and the PS4, Switch, and PC version is like night and day. Everything is improved in every single way, from the visuals to the menus to the UI to the quality of the audio with the voice acting. The translation by NIS America is pretty damn solid. I didn't really see any mistakes on there. The gameplay, especially on the higher difficulties, is awesome. I love it. One of the best combat systems that I've seen in an RPG. Very strategic, very deliberate, very calculated. It's about as difficult or as easy as you want it to. The story, the music, the visuals, the way that it is very Shin Megami Tensei, in that the story is super mature and very real, and the art style is very similar to Shin Megami Tensei, with everybody being super pale white. A lot of shades of gray, literally, in this art style. But, you know, that comes to the game's benefit because a lot of the main characters, a lot of the important characters stand out even more because they have parts of their clothing that has color. And so, because everything is kind of monochrome, it makes all of the things with color pop out even more. And of course, that's symbolism and story-related stuff, and I'm not gonna get to that now. But please, believe me that this game is... wow. Like, it is so good. The last time that I felt so strongly about a game was The World Ends With You. You know, The World Ends With You on DS. I remember when I was a teenager and I was down in the dumps and I was like in one of the worst years in my entire life. That game got me through so much, and it really forced me and encouraged me to grow up in the same way that the messages and the symbolism and the story and the characters of the Caligula effect are forcing me and inspiring me and motivating me to grow up again in this next step in my life that I'm about to take. In a similar way to how The World Ends With You had a bunch of teenagers growing up in this, you know, fictional Shibuya run by evil people, the Caligula effect is almost like the sequel to that, where now instead of a teenager growing up is a full-on adult growing up into the world of adulthood in Japan, again, in this fake world in Japan, run by a bunch of evil people that have their own motives, and, God, I just... go play this damn game, man. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's amazing. Please, especially if you've played Caligula Effect on PS Vita, I highly recommend that you give this game a second chance on the newer consoles, because this might be an unforgettable experience for me. This might be a Game of the Year contender, in my opinion. This game really affected me that much. It has its slip-ups, obviously. It has its flaws. It has some ambitious ideas that kind of fall flat after a certain point. But if you stick with the main story, and if you even go back and play through it a second time with the alternate routes and do other stuff that you weren't able to do before, then yeah, I think we got a really good game in our hands here. The Caligula Effect, I highly recommend it. Go get this game. It's awesome. Switch, PS4, PC, yeah. And, you know, and again, if you want to, you know, explore what the original was like, the game is still out on Vita, so knock yourself out if you want. But, yeah, go get it. Awesome game. And that about does it for the review. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to me ramble on about this game that I really like a lot. If you enjoyed this review, of course, you guys know what to do. Give me that like, that subscription, bell icon. You can comment whatever you want, and all social media links are down in the description below. And of course, I want to give a special shout out to NIS America. They are the ones who provided me with a PlayStation 4 review code that made this review possible. So thank you very much for the support. Bye.
まだまだ暴れ足りません。イフエちゃん、元気が有り余ってるわね。